Welcome to April of the 2026 A Year of Quilts by Studio 180 Design. They have created a wonderful calendar, and each month they are highlighting one of their most popular or favorite patterns. We've done January, February, and March, and now we're to April. And the pattern is called Tulip Trails. Tulip Trails again uses the Star 60 ruler, which we used in April. And what I'm doing this month or this year is creating a quilt. Let me show you. Here's my quilt that I'm working on. In January, I made the center wedge star block. In February, I used the V block and corner pop to create a border. And in March, I used the Star 60 tool to create this lovely border. Now for April, we're using the Star 60 again, and I have an idea on how I'm going to arrange a border, and I will probably make sure that I put it up over on that side. So let's get started. I've got the Tulip Trails pattern. And the Tulip Trails pattern is really, really sweet pattern. I really liked making it. I've made the quilt already. And what I've decided that I'm going to use a variety of pinks, just some hand-dyed pinks, purples with my neutral background fabric. The units that I'm going to be working on is this half-piece hexagon, and they're calling it the top half and the bottom half. So the quilt is built in rows, and we build these half hexagons. So I'm going to be building the half hexagons using just a scrappy arrangement of my fabrics. So when we look here at our tool instructions, remember this could be a PDF download from the website, or I could be using the instructions that came with the tool. I like these. I can print them, hole punch, and store them in a binder. I've decided that this row of border is going to be 3 inches wide. My diamond strips, so my colored fabric, need to be cut 2¼ inches. I'm going to have side triangles, which is my background fabric, is going to be 2¼ My half rectangles, which are those end pieces, are 3¼ by 4 inches. And then I've got another one circled. It's called a companion triangle strip. So when we look here, we're going to have these 3 sets of 3 offset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a companion triangle in there to give us some shape. So let me show you what I'm going to do. First thing is I'm going to cut a bunch of 2¼ inch diamonds. I'm going to cut 2¼ inch strips. One, 2¼ Put that back in my scrap bin. And then I'm going to use my Star 60 tool to trim off to get that angle. And then I'm going to cut some strips. Now it's easy to tell what those bits are, and it says, to trim it at 4 inches, but I can see here right away my 4-inch line, that matches up perfectly. So I'm just going to get as many out of here as I can. There's one. There's 2. I may get 3. So the idea is that these 3 would go like that with my white triangles. So I want to have a whole bunch of these, and what I want to do is I want to have them mix and match. So I will continue to cut, and I will cut a bunch of these pieces up and we'll see where we come back. My pieces are all cut. I have my diamonds. I have my side triangles. I have my companion triangles. And then I've got my half rectangles. So again, we did this in March. We're going to do this for April. We're going to take the diamond and we're going to place it over top of the side triangle and stitch a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to take all of them and do them all at once. So I've sewn all my diamonds to the right hand side triangle, matching up that flat butt edge. I'm going to press the seam allowance, and then I'm going to press the seam allowance to the diamond, and then I'm going to sew the next side triangle on, matching up that butt edge. My units are sewn. My seam allowances, because I pressed that first seam towards the diamond, or away from the diamond, my second seam goes towards the diamond, and this comes in really, really handy for this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these. Now we said I was doing a 3-inch, so I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to find the 3-inch mark, line that up, and trim. So let me trim right-handed. Remember, right-handed trimming, we want to tip off towards the right-hand side. We're going to line up that 3-inch and we're going to cut with our right hand. Right hand, and I'm not very good with my right hand. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the back end by turning around both the ruler and the block and lining up that dotted line right there. My center should match up and my dotted line should match my seams. And there's my unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the others so that I can create little triangle units like this. Let me trim. Why don't I show you the left hand while we're at it? We're doing a 3-inch unit, so I'm going to find the 3-inch. There we go. Trim, trim, turn everything around, and trim the back end. Now, I like to do all my front end trimming. So here's a really cool little trick if you were feeling brave enough. Lay out a number of your units, cut or trim one unit, just get rid of the scraps, slide to the next unit, and leave everything laid out. Then you don't have to keep moving your fabrics, picking up, putting down. You're kind of doing multiple steps at once. I really like this trick if my units are small enough that I can put multiples on my cutting board. 3, 3. Then I can turn around my tool, turn around all of my units, and cut off the back end. It's a fast way if you are doing a lot of units rather than doing the tip, doing all three sides at once, because then you're rotating your fabric or your unit, you're rotating the block, you're rotating your block, you're rotating your tool, and it can take a little bit of time. So I now have a number of them, and what I'm going to start doing is I think I'm going to alternate. I've got a pink, whoops, there we go. I've got a pink, I've got a purple, I've got a pink. I'm going to sew those together, and then I'm going to take those large companion triangles that I had. Let's just slide this over. Sew those two, sew those two. I need to mark. Actually, I don't need to mark because if I flip this over, you can see that I've got a seam going down and a seam going up. I do not have to mark these or pin them unless I actually want to, because those two seams are going to nest for me. Yeah, let's sew. So there's my two. I can add the third one. Here is a personal decision. Because I know how this unit is going to go together, I can press one direction or I can press that seam open. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the seam to one side and I'm going to press it away from the center. There we go. And then I can stitch that one on. Let's get it going. I've sewn my three sets of Star 60 diamonds together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a triangle or a companion unit, and then I will be popping those up on the end. Let's see how it goes. I've sewn that companion triangle in. Now, I don't need to trim it down because I cut it precision piecing. That was an option that I had. Now I'm going to sew my half rectangles on either side. Now there's my one border. Because these half rectangles are oversized size, I will need to trim them up just to square them up the top and the bottom. And I'm going to do two sets for my two sides of my border. My quilt at this point measures 14.5 inches. My border measures about 15.5. So what I need to do is I need to take half an inch off and half an inch off to square that up. So let's do it this way with my first choice ruler. It's a little bit easier to manage. And I'm just going to take off a half inch there. And I'm going to take off a half inch here. Then my border will fit on there perfectly. So let's sew that on, and we'll trim the other one up and sew that on as well. I've sewn the one border on. Now I need to sew the other border on. So I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to add that solid square in the corner. So there are my Star 60 tulip trails units done. Everything that I've shown you is exactly how it is in the pattern. This is a very, very straightforward pattern. It really is nice to stitch. The only challenge is, it's like when we did the wedge star, is putting those two halves together. You got to pin lots. But other than that, it's great. Now, my plan was to put my Tulip Trails units on opposite sides of my blue higher ground units. And I wasn't paying attention, but I kind of like that. So next up, this was April. Next up is May, and that's the Fiesta units. And I'm going to put them there. They're going to be finishing at 3 inches so that it's nice and square. And then I will add the triangles around. Happy quilting.